Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Hi, my name is Rosalie Olmstead. I am the Strategic Partner Coordinator here at Women in Cybersecurity. We often go by our acronym WiCyS because that is exactly what we are, a global cyber sisterhood. It is a pleasure to have you all here today with WiCyS Strategic Partner SentinelOne. But before we dive into today's presentation and before I hand it over to Martha, I would like to give you a quick overview of the WiCyS organization. WiCyS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a mission to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. Our community is made up of over 11,000 members in 103 different countries. We have 72 professional affiliates and 314 student chapters around the globe. We offer a range of initiatives and skills development programs for all career levels. As you can see here, we separate them out between early, mid, and senior, as well as our different events and resources that we have for the community. Additionally, all of our job openings are available through the WiCyS Strategic Partners, are available through the Job Board Plus Plus for members. They're there and available year round. We have a few upcoming events in the next few months. Our fall virtual career fair will be taking place on September 24th. We hope to see you there. We have over 24 strategic partners that will be showcasing positions between internships up to senior level positions. And additionally, our WiCyS 2026 conference is taking place March 11th through the 13th in National Harbor, Maryland. We hope to see you there. We currently have a few different programming efforts available, all virtual, and the ones right now are our book club and our stage-ready public speaking. If you have any questions about any of our current programs available, please feel free to email info@wicys.org. We want to take a minute to thank all of our strategic partners who fund us year-round. Our Tier 1 partners being specifically 3M, Akamai, Amazon, Bloomberg, Cisco, Ford, Google, Lockheed Martin, Optum, Palo Alto Networks, SANS Institute, and SentinelOne. Please feel free to ask questions throughout today's webinar. Martha is going to be paying attention to the question box throughout the entire presentation, but we're going to dedicate a set amount of time at the end to do a Q&A session. So please make sure you're dropping those questions below. And lastly, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the WiCyS newsletter to stay up to date on all of our upcoming events and programs. You can find it at wicys.org in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Martha Goodwin with SentinelOne.
Hello, thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be located. My name is Martha Goodwin, and one of the things that I have heard a lot over my years doing what I do is that no one knows what a sales engineer is. No one's ever heard of it. And to be honest, it really is the career I never knew I wanted. We have a poll that's going to be showing up shortly in the poll section, asking you your opinion of the sales engineering role and if you've ever heard of it. Just like to get a little bit of a baseline on where everyone's at with understanding what the role is. As we get started, a little bit about me. I live in New Hampshire in the Northeast. I actually graduated with a liberal arts degree from Hofstra University, so had never touched a computer, did not touch a computer. In fact, I had a word processor when I was in college. My first job out of college was actually at working in the Senate as a PR intern I did that for about 7 months. And then I decided I really kind of wanted more to get into the corporate world. And I took a job as an administrative assistant in a tech company. That really was my first introduction to tech. Loved the tech piece of it. Worked, did a little bit of everything. It was a startup, so I wound up getting hands-on in tech. And after that job ended, I went in and took my MCSE certifications, my Novell certifications, and that's really how I got started in tech. Before that, I had no practical experience whatsoever in that. My first job in the tech world was really as a network admin, system admin at a software company. Again, started this job, had never heard of what an SE was. but fell into that SE role. And currently I run a nationwide team of 16 sales engineers focused on the public sector in the SLED vertical. So first off, kind of want to talk about what is a sales engineer. So one thing you'll find if you decide after this talk is over that you're really interested in learning more, or maybe even applying for a position as a sales engineer, what you're going to find is every company calls a sales engineer something else. So there are companies out there that a sales engineer is a solutions engineer. There are some that call it a sales engineer. You'll hear pre-sales engineer, you'll hear systems engineer, and you'll hear solutions architect. I have, at one time or another, been called all of those titles, and I've never really changed what my job is. So it doesn't really matter what the title is. Look for all of those titles if you decide that this is something you want to try to get into. They're all really referencing the same thing, and they are kind of interchangeable. So then it's, what is the job? Like, what do you do as a sales engineer? To me, it really quantifies being interested in tech. You have to be interested in tech. You have to know what tech is, what you want to do with tech, and you have to be social. If you're not social and you don't want to be able to talk to people, then it might not be the position for you. It really is a combination of that social acumen along with the technical acumen. So you need to demo products. So get on a Zoom meeting, much as this one, and show the product to potential customers. If they decide they like what they're seeing, they might ask you to prove the value of the product. That means you're going to install it in their network. You're going to run test cases with them. You're going to make sure that it fits their needs, because you're not just going to sell a product to a customer just to say you sold it. It really needs to provide value for that customer, and you need to show that value. And part of that is building those trusted relationships. So typically you're going to be aligned with a salesperson, sometimes more than one. Sales engineers can be one-to-one with a sales account rep, can be two-to-one. They could be pulled where they're working with, 8 sales reps. It really depends on the organization. It depends on the size of the company, and it depends on the rank of the sales engineer. Typically, if you're doing inside sales or commercial sales, which we'll discuss the differences between those a little later, you're going to be you're going to have more reps to work with. If you're in what's considered a strategic role, you're more likely to be one-to-one or two-to-one. But because of that, your salesperson is going to build those sales relationships with procurement, with the CISO, with the decision makers. You need to build those relationships with your technical counterparts, the people who are actually going to be using the product. You're building those relationships, you're showing them the value of the product, and you're talking to them about tech. You're really, getting to know them and what their needs are beyond necessarily even your product, because sometimes there might be complementary products and there might be other things they don't know about the industry that you're going to be able to share with them. And I think that's really important about that role. And in the end, you'll help to close the deal. So you're going to be working along with your salesperson. You are a partnership, whether it's one-to-one or 7-to-1, whoever you work with in that deal is your partner, and you're going to be working with them as such. And so you're going to help to close the deal in the end, making sure that all the technical hurdles have been crossed. And you have to make sure that it's actually a good product. Salespeople love to come to an SE and say, hey, we have an opportunity for this deal. And your answer might be, well, our product doesn't do that. It doesn't fit that need. We need to say no. We shouldn't go into this product. And that's actually part of an SE role. A lot of SEs don't take that ownership of their role, and that's really important to do. It's important to show that you're part of that partnership and really make sure that you're doing what's right by the customer. And that's really one of the things that I value about that SE role. Outside of doing and selling those deals and working with customers, a lot of times as an SE, And SE stands for all of the above, I guess, except for solution architect, which that's an SA, but the others, everyone calls us SEs. So as an SC, a lot of times you're going to wind up attending trade shows and working booths for your organization. So a show like an RSA or a Black Hat or local regional shows. They happen almost every day of the week in different areas of the country, and you're going to be expected to attend those shows and be the person that answers the technical questions. You might even be called upon, depending on your role, to speak at some of these presentations and go ahead and work that relationship and work that deal. Now, what I get asked a lot when I start talking to people about how much I love being an SE, and one of the questions is, well, you're part of sales. Doesn't that mean you're working on commission? It does. What most people don't realize is that your base pay is still very healthy. And I've hired a lot of people in my day, and if I hire someone who's never been an SE, the first thing I tell people is your base is what you're supposed to get used to. Your commission is what you use to save, add on to your house, go on vacation for those special projects. You can't count on commission. It's never guaranteed to be there. But what you might expect, because based on the poll, it sounds like a few of you know what it is and have heard of it, but a lot of you aren't sure what it is, don't know how to get into it, or have never heard of an SE role. So I want to make sure that, we talk about what your expected OTE is. So what is an OTE? OTE is on target earnings. As an SE, you get a quota. Say it's, and I'm for ease of use, I'm going to say it's $1 million. So your quota is $1 million. That means you and your sales partner, if you're one-to-one, have to sell $1 million to hit your number and to hit your on-target earnings. Now, as an SC, your pay is typically 70% base, 30% commission. It can vary. Some companies go as low as 60-40, some go as high as 80-20. So depending on your organization, but from what I've seen, it's either 70-30 or 75-25 is the one that I see the most. So for the purpose of this, we'll talk about that 70-30 split. So as an entry-level SC, you would expect to have a base salary of 80 to about 110,000. And your expected on-target earnings, that's with commission, would be 100,000 to 140,000. So as I said, this is technically 0 to 2 years experience. This is usually a smaller company that you're going to get into, and this is with no other prior work experience. Now, say you are currently a director of technology or director of cyber, and you're already in the cyber industry. That counts as experience. In fact, my current team of 16 SEs, I believe I have 4 or 5 that have never been an SE before. I love hiring people who've never been SEs before because they understand the customer. They come from the customer, they understand the customer, they're used to that role. They would be considered mid-level or even senior level. And those base salaries, and I'm just going to give you a range because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but feel free to reach out, could be anywhere from 120 to 220 for a base, and it could be 160 to over 300 for on-target earnings. So as I mentioned, it can also be a very profitable position, and we won't get into it, but once you hit that 100%, most companies give you what's called accelerators, which actually means you make more in commission that you would for that first 100%. You would make, exponentially more. And that grows, and that's going to be different, with different companies. If you want to learn more about how that works, please, feel free to ask questions, but I don't want to spend too much time on this because I really want to talk about what those roles are. So I already talked a little bit about my SE job history. I started off as a network system admin at a company. That was my first technical role. Well, that company happened to be in the tech industry, and they decided to add sales engineers. And after 3 years of carrying a pager and being paged at all hours of the day and night, I decided I was done and really couldn't take the pager anymore. So I was like, this sounds interesting. Let me go and see what this is about. So I actually applied for the position internally. It was great. It was an internal job. I supported one product. It was a system network monitoring product. I didn't have any travel. We were still a small company. I didn't visit customers. The only travel was for trade shows. So it was about maybe 3 times a year I went on the road to do a trade show for 2 or 3 days. It's a great first level job. And someone asked me what SLED stands for. Apologies. SLED stands for State Local Education. It is the public sector minus federal. My first foray into cyber as an SE was for another startup. I tend to go towards startups for a SIM product. And in that case, I was actually, because we were only 10 employees, I was working with federal customers. I was working with enterprise, with strategic, and even international. And in that case, I was on the road 3 out of every 4 weeks. Part of that is the size of company. That makes a huge difference in this. If the company is very small and you're handling all the customers, you're much more likely to have to travel all over the world. If you did that first SC job at a company that had 3,000 or 4,000, you'd probably be regionalized. So, you'd be, carrying Mid-Atlantic, which would consist of 3 states, and you would have to travel regionally. So just realize, just because my first foray into that enterprise SC was a lot of travel, that is not typical other than startups. Usually in larger organization, if you're an enterprise SC and you're working with, larger customers, you are usually regionalized in, a certain area. I moved over to a larger company, about 2,000 SEs and 2,000 employees, I should say, doing network threat detection. And there I worked in both SLED, which is what I do now, state local education, and I was also what's called a channel SE. And we'll get into what the differences are, I think, on the next slide. So I'm not going to go, too much over those. What was nice about that, and I did this on purpose, I was completely burnt out from traveling as much as I did, though I enjoyed the travel, loved experiencing different cultures, working with customers all over the world, seeing what different patterns were and of work and what they were looking for and what was important to them. I was burnt out. So I moved to a larger company, and what was nice about that is my territory was New England. So basically, I covered New England and upstate New York. I had 6 states. It was basically most places I could get to within a 3-hour drive. If I went, further out in New York, I had to get on a plane. But for the most part, I didn't have to stay away for very long, which I was ready for. I needed to move on there. I worked there for 4 years. I went back to another startup. This case, I was the principal SC, which basically was the only SC for the company. Unfortunately, pre-Series A, they lost their funding. I only lasted there for a short time. From there, I moved to another medium-sized company, and I managed a team of 6 SEs covering all sizes, all verticals, with the exception of federal for the whole U.S. Didn't do a lot of traveling. We were a smaller company. We had, some large customers, but there wasn't a ton of customers to visit, so I didn't have to do as much travel. And it was also during COVID, so again, not as much traveling, seeing people. Then we come to my current position where I currently manage, as I said, a team of 16 engineers, all in state, local, higher ed roles. All right, let's move into, first off, what are your skills? What do you need to be an SE? All of these are equally important. In fact, I have been known in job interviews to ask candidates, what % sales are you and what % engineer are you? Because you have to be both. You can't be 100% technical in the weeds and not able to be social. You need to also be salesy, but you need to know the technical because you do have a sales rep. So you should be, your largest percentage should be in that technical side. So I would typically recommend minimum 60% technical up to 70%, and sales no less than 20% sales. If you're thinking about how you are and how you talk to people, you have to have that. You have to be able to build relationships. You have to be comfortable talking on a variety of subjects with people from completely different backgrounds than you, completely different interests. Whether it is, it's not a boys network. So a lot of people in the SE world are men. That's just been traditional. And I don't know if it's because it does sometimes involve travel, but you can see that to a certain extent, there was the old boys network in here where a lot of, entertaining of customers came with sporting events and, going out to drink and going to golf and, stuff that maybe some women like, some don't. I personally love sports. So I loved going, taking out someone for a Yankees game or for, a football game or whatever the case may be. I still do. I'm still one of the first to volunteer. If there's a sporting event, I'll be there and I'll, happily. But not everyone's like that, and not everyone has that. But it's grown beyond that. Your socialization and your relationship building can be whatever you want it to be. In fact, and I will use this as an example because I love this, and I haven't done this yet, but I plan to. One of my coworkers took out one of her customers for a pedicure. So building relationships and being able to make connections can be done in whatever way you feel comfortable. It does not have to be one thing or another. It will typically involve a lot of meals. So you are probably going to go out to a lot of lunches, breakfasts, dinners, and so forth. So there is that, and that is part of building relationships because we all tend to talk around the dinner table, even if it's out at, a restaurant. You're going to get to know people. You have to be independent. With the exception of the entry level, most SCs are remote workers. You have to live in your territory. So if your territory is Florida, you have to live in Florida. If it's California and it's Northern Cal, you're expected to live in that Northern Cal area. A couple of reasons for that. It's much easier to build those relationships because you're much more likely to see your customers in person. It's also much more likely that you're not going to cost your company a lot. Just think about it. If everyone lived at headquarters and you had to go visit customers, you'd be traveling all the time. You'd be on planes all the time. So there's budget concerns around that. But there is also personal relationships. There's events that's going to happen. You're going to do a lot of on-sites. You're going to take your customers out to dinner. And you can't do that very easily if you live far away. So most companies want you to live in the territory you support, with the exception of that internal, which we'll get to in a minute when we talk about the different roles. And then you have to be comfortable presenting. I'm not saying you have to present to a large audience. I have done demos for 1 or 2 people as an SC. I've also had a panel demo where, and I will say this was the first time it happened to me, and it was a little jarring at first. I walked into a stadium seated room, and there were 5 seats in the front, and it was for me, my salesperson, and a couple of our partners, and there was about 50 people in the audience asking us questions after we did the demo. That's not the typical. That was pretty unusual for me. Typically, you're doing demos for about 5 or 6 people on average, depending on how big the customer is and what the project is and how many people are involved in that project. But it is something to keep in mind. All right, so talking about positions, we talked about this a little. So the first entry level, and I know someone asked me about entry level or, how to get into it. Typically, if you are not currently in cyber, you don't currently have a cyber position, your first job is going to be an inside commercial, small, medium business SE. The nice thing about that is tends to be minimal travel. So if you don't want to travel, you typically don't have to. Tends to be all remote. It tends to be, when I say remote, you're going to an office. You might be in your house, but a lot of times you're going to an office, so you do make those work connections, and you're typically on Zoom meetings. You're not visiting people in person as much. You tend to have more traditional work hours. Now, I will say, if your corporate headquarters are in California and that's where everyone goes to the office, and you're working East Coast customers, you might be working East Coast hours, or vice versa. If you're in a company in Virginia and your territory is California, but it's for SMB and you're going to the office every day, you might be working, 12 to 8 or 12 to 9, whatever, the hours are. So you have more traditional work hours, so you're not working strange hours as much. You tend to not do as many events. You might go to a trade show every once in a while, or you might have a customer event every once in a while, but you're not on the road as much. Now from there, you can move into any rest of these pretty much. The channel role is really about training. So we all have partners, and the partners help us to sell and help us to evangelize our company to their customers. A lot of times channel is you're training those SEs that work at the channel. So you're not necessarily talking to the customers yourself. In fact, sometimes I went like 6 months without talking to a customer when I was doing a channel role. You're mostly doing the training and building relationships with the partner SEs. So you're working with people who do the same position as you, but they're doing it for 20, 30, sometimes 300 different products. Sometimes they specialize, sometimes they just do one type, maybe they just do endpoint or they just do SIM, but that's who you're building. You tend to have a lot more events if you're channel. So they might be localized. Again, if you're at a larger company and you're doing channel for a local, or if you're doing channel for a national, you might have travel, but it's usually around social events. It's usually around official trainings with meals and events, whether they're sporting events or just, golfing events or movie theaters. I've worked with some partners who they rent out a movie theater and they do a premiere of a movie. And you're there in the beginning to talk to them, maybe talk to their customers. So it's really, you're typically not talking to those customers. It's definitely more about training. So if you love training and you want to be able to train people, then a channel role is amazing. It's a great way to do it. We're going to skip strategic and global for now, and we're going to move over to enterprise, because typically if you're inside commercial SMB, that's entry level. If you're at a partner and you want to come over, a lot of times you'll start off with channel. Once you've done one of those two roles, typically you're going to move to one of the roles on the right, if you feel like it. If you like the traditional work hours, if you like the training, you might stick with that inside role or that channel role. But if you want to move up and do something a little different, you're typically moving to the three on the right. Now, the nice thing about those positions are actually all the same, but just different verticals. And there might be even more verticals than that. Enterprise will consist of everything from healthcare to financial. If you're working at a really large company, you might have SEs that just work in financial. So say you currently work in a role where you're working for a large Fortune 500 financial company and you're doing cyber, you could easily work as an SC in the cyber world focusing on financial customers. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people make that move and they stay in that vertical because they talk the language. So say you're in healthcare. Healthcare has different cyber needs. And if you did cyber for a hospital, you might, if you decide you want to be an SC, try to do an SC role in the healthcare vertical. Because guess what? Now when you go and talk to those customers, potential customers, you can build that relationship. You know their language. You know healthcare. And, most of my work, I've actually done all of these. I feel comfortable in state, local. I feel comfortable in federal, but it's because you know their language. So if you've never worked in the federal government, you've never worked for federal, you're going to want to have some experience as an SC so you can learn the other part of it. You can learn the federal. You can't go right into federal from a finance job. You'd probably go into enterprise or you'd go into inside commercial, depending again on your level of experience. Federal, you're going to need clearance and you're going to need to know the nomenclature. It's for federal and for SLED. There's a lot of understanding of contracts. There's a lot of understanding of what you need for the product to be able to be used. Different branches of the DoD have different certifications. Same thing with SLED. Different states have different certifications and different requirements. So those positions essentially do the same job. They just have different things that they have to learn as part of their position. But once you're that inside commercial SMB, if you want to graduate into one of those, that's usually the natural progression. If you're enterprise and you're regionalized, still minimal travel, The traditional work hours tend to not be as traditional. You're more likely to be entertaining customers and going out to dinner with them or going out to events with them. We have SCs that do what's called threat ops. They capture the flags. They run those. Those can be during the day, during work hours. They could also be in the evening at a restaurant where they're running them, and it's a gamified capture the flag where customers love this and they work on that. So you tend to work different hours. That being said, as long as you're getting your job done and you have that goes back to that independence, and you have to be able to work independently. As long as you have that, you would be able to, do that and, make your own hours. As long as you're there for customers, it doesn't matter if you're working 6 to 9 at night doing a threat ops and taking 3 hours in the middle of the day to, go to an event at your kid's school or go to a doctor's appointment or have lunch with a friend. Whatever it is, you tend to be a little bit more autonomous, with the understanding that obviously your job is done, it has to get done, and you have a quota fill. So you're working with your salesperson to get that quota filled. Now, I said we come back to strategic global. Those tend to be the last level, I should say, of positions. It's not for everyone. It tends to be, when you're strategic or global, you tend to have 5 to 10 customers total, but they tend to be global customers. So you have a large global customer. You are going to know people at this customer in various offices around the world, various departments around the world. Say, I'm going to go back to my SIM days. I was selling SIM to Fortune 500 customers. I had to go to all their offices. I had to be in their office over in Europe. I had to be in their office in Texas. I had to be in their office in New York. And you wind up learning not just the person that started that project, but everyone else that's involved with it. And that's part of being that strategic global. It is definitely even more so about building relationships. It's more so about getting to know this one customer and working with this one customer than it is about, opening up that to all of enterprise. It depends on what you love. I personally really love the enterprise SLED Fed space. But I can see people would love strategic global. For me, it got to be, like I said, too much travel. I was just everywhere all the time, and I needed a break from it. But it is a different skill set, and it is more about being able to build those relationships. If you can't build those relationships, that's probably one of the harder ones, that and channel. All right. Moving on, talking about that SE job track. If you decide you want to stay on that SE job track, this is really where it goes. You can start off as an intern. So I don't know if we have folks in here on the call that are in college currently, but if you are, a lot of cyber security companies will take interns for the summer. I know we do. I know a lot of our competitors do. A lot of our partners do. So if you're in college, typically you're between your junior and senior year. That's the summer. Typically, most people want internships. I know WiCyS at their event in March has a lot of companies that are looking for interns. I've done their event before. It's a great event, and it's a great place to network and find out about those internships. From there, inside commercial, that type of role, you need to have the technical acumen, and you need to have the potential for the social skills. So you need to be able to talk to customers, explain the technology to customers. And one of the things that, it goes back to what your skill set is. If you can relate, and I'll give you an example. I used to talk about how when you're at a SIM, you're collecting all the data, and you have to find out what's important. And you talk about, well, your closed caption recording system is recording everything. So when there's a crime, they need to look at that data, but they really only want to look at a small portion of it.
while Martha's figuring out her audio, I'm going to come on and take a pause for a second. Martha, do you need any assistance? Give her a quick second.
Oh, geez. It looks like my phone disconnected me. So apologize for that.
Here we go.
Yeah, all right. We were talking about inside commercial. So as I said, that is that first position. It is a great way to, as long as you have the technical acumen, if you see an inside or commercial job position and you want to get into being an SE, that is where you start. That is where you would typically go. If you have experience with enablement, because I saw someone ask about if channel would be similar to enablement. If you have technical experience and you have done technical enablement or training of some sort in the technical field, Channel SE is actually a great place to start. You could start with that because you have that experience as a technical presenter and as a trainer. So, you know, for that question that was in the chat group, that would be a great one. Once you've had some experience as either an inside commercial, as a Channel SE, or maybe you work for a private company and you're a director of IT, or you're doing network admin or system admin in a specific field. And not to say that, you know, your vendors will poach you. A great place to go is to something you know the product. So that's how I started. Luckily, it was for the company I actually worked for. But I do know that a lot of people, a lot of SEs, they'll know, you know, I work for SentinelOne. They'll know SentinelOne inside and out. And they'll say, well, we want to go work for you. Do you have positions? You know, obviously, we never love hiring from our customers because it's always like, well, I have to go ask approval from your manager because I'm not going to put them in this kind of position and have them. But at the same time, usually that means they want to leave anyway and they're going to leave. So it is one of those things that it's a slippery slope. But if someone has familiarity with a product, whether it's, you know, Varonis, Proofpoint, Mimecast, whatever the product is, you've used it as a customer and you want to be an SE, it's a great place to start. Whether it's at this company or a past company, if you've used a technical product in the cyberspace and you know it really well and you want to be an SE, go look at that vendor, see if they're hiring. It's a great place to start. And then you would go right into being an enterprise, state, local, or federal SE. You wouldn't necessarily start at that inside commercial. From enterprise federal, some people move to strategic. That's the one that I was talking about where you're working more with that global and higher value accounts. You might only have 5 or 10 accounts. It's usually minimal. Some people are like, you know what, I don't want that, but I really want to get into the tech. I want to be a cloud specialist. I want to do everything cloud. That's where you would go into a solution architect specialist. That tends to be the subject matter expert for a specific product line. So once you've been an SE and you say, you know what, I love being an SE, but I really want to focus on this one product. I have a really big affinity for it. I know it inside and out. I am the expert. I'm who everyone goes to. You might want to look at that type of role. And that's typically where you can go in as an SA and be that specialist and be that SME. And that's usually, you know, where a lot of people go if they want to go into more technical versus more salesy. Now, there are other tracks you can do, and these go back and forth. You can go from being an SE, being into management. That's the track I went into. You can go into professional services. You can go into customer support, training. Now, the nice thing is you can also come from any of those into being an SE. Say you're customer support now, and you're like, you know what, I really want to be on the sales side. I mean, to a certain extent, pre-sales engineers are basically pre-sales support. I mean, yes, we still use the support team. They're wonderful, could not live without them. But you do that first level troubleshooting. You're helping your customers to make sure the product works. That's part of the proof of value. So that is what you're doing. So a lot of these can go back and forth. PM, I shouldn't have put in the initials. Product management. Say you're or product marketing. Say you're really into, I want to make the product better. I want to get in there and help design what that product is. I want to talk to customers about what they see that product doing and building out a project plan for our developers to actually do that product. That might be, you know, a track for you. And like I said, with the exception of management, which you're typically going from an SE to a manager to, you know, and on as you would for any other managed track. The other 5 that I have listed here can actually go back or forth. They can either be where you are now and you can become an SE, or you can be an SE and go to one of those positions. All right, well, hopefully I left enough time for question and answers. Someone asked me about positions for SEs, interns in South America. I know my company hires interns worldwide. I don't know exactly which countries, but we do hire. I know we've had interns in Europe, in Asia, in South America. I don't know if they're SE interns, but we do hire SEs worldwide for the summer positions or whatever their summer is from school. I'm assuming most large customers would do that, like a Microsoft, Oracle, any of those companies. I would expect if they have an office in your country or they have salespeople in your country and they have some sort of presence, I would assume you would be able to get an internship there. And then someone asked about channel being similar to enablement. I did kind of answer that while we were going through it. Yes, channel is very similar to enablement. If you are currently doing enablement and are interested in being a sales engineer, a channel engineer would be a great role. It would be a great one to pursue, and I do think that it would be a natural fit. Difference between inside sales engineers and other sales engineers. Inside sales engineers, you're either working for a company that hasn't expanding to an outside sales force, so it could be all size customers, but in a larger company, it's typically the small, medium businesses. It is the customers that are not going to spend as much money, so the travel budget for those sales, because they are a little bit smaller. So it tends to be more of the inside. Like I said, some people stay. I actually have a really good friend that I worked with back in the early 2000s that is still doing inside sales. She loves it. She doesn't want to travel. She likes working her normal hours, and that is what position she has decided to be able to do that. And that is, great. If you decide you want to move into that outside position and work from home and, be able to go out, then that's also available to you. So someone says, does it matter if you're more able to do the tech or explain the tech to non-technical? Is it easier to teach the tech or teach new sales engineer? It is easier to teach the tech. You need to have the technical aptitude, but if you're naturally an introvert and you don't feel comfortable talking to people, you might be able to get, out of that. I would recommend going to, and now I can't remember, Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a great place to learn how to public speak and feel comfortable. That might be a great role, a great training for that, social piece of it. And if you do that and you have the tech, I think you'd be great. Professional training that is involved in a sales engineer role. Professional training, it's really, there is no professional training for an SE role other than what your company provides you. You need to have the technical aptitude. Like I said, I went in and got my MCSE for Microsoft NT40, so totally aging myself. But once you have some sort of technical aptitude, as I mentioned, if you're a customer and you have experience with a product, go see if that vendor is looking for an SE if you want to do that. So I saw someone asked about a college degree. Great question. You do not have to have a college degree to be an SE. A lot of folks do, but not everyone has to be. And shout out, I see I have a question from Champlain College. Shout out to Champlain. I actually have a child that goes to Champlain College. Love you guys. It's a great school, and I know they have a WiCyS program. One of these days I'm going to go there and talk to that WiCyS chapter. Would love to do that. So shout out to Champlain College. So let's see what other questions we have here. I'm senior in my career and focused on operations and customer pain points within business development role. Oh, sorry, that question just, oh, there it is. What training courses can you recommend to increase? I would say find what you're interested in. So if you're interested in cloud, Google and Microsoft both have a lot of free classes that you can learn more about cloud. In fact, I know AWS. When I was already technical, but I didn't know cloud very well. AWS lets you go in and actually have free cloud services. I think my bill 1 month got up to 18 cents, where I was actually able to build my own cloud instances and teach myself a little bit about cloud. Find something that you are interested in that you could go in and learn more about. And that's really what you need to do. There is no, oh, I'm going to go to school to be an SC. There is a lot of SC groups on LinkedIn. Join those. A lot of times they'll help you with some of that and what you're going to expect, but you're not going to go to school to be an SC. And that's part of the reason why no one's ever heard of this job, is because there is no training to be an SC. It's, you know, the product, you have social skills, you apply to be an SC. It's really kind of that point, or you know something about that position, whether you know Active Directory really well. You go and work for a company that does a lot with Active Directory. That's one example. Someone said, how does a product manager role differ from an SE role? So a product manager role is very different. So an SE, easiest way to explain it is a liaison between the customer and the company. So you are the technical liaison between your customer and the company you work for. You are teaching your customer about your company and about the product, and you're grabbing feedback from your customer and bringing it back to the company. The product manager is actually a liaison between the developers and the sales engineers. So a lot of times the product manager, they'll go to customers occasionally, but a lot of times they get their feedback from the sales engineers, and they take all of that and they utilize that to work with their developers and actually go in there and get the product to match what the customers are asking for. Someone said that they're interested more in the program project management. There's definitely project management courses you can take. I've never been a product manager, so that's not a piece that I focus on, but there is definitely project management and product management classes that you can take to learn how to become more of a project manager. I see are the clients mostly Canadian-based, or do you also support clients in the U.S. or globally? So currently, I support customers in the U.S., so I am working with state, local, higher education, and K through 12 in the United States specifically. That being said, we have a team in Canada that supports Canadian government, federal, their provinces, also enterprise. So typically, once a company gets to be over 1,500 employees, you're going to have regionalized teams all over the world. So we have SEs in Australia, we have SEs in Korea, we have SEs in Brazil, we have SEs all over the world, all over Europe, all over the North America. So that's really not, if you're talking a small company and they're US based, they're typically not going to have that international presence yet. It's really as they grow. As far as which cloud platforms are most important to your clients right now, I see all three that are mentioned. I see AWS a lot. I see Azure. I see GCP. We are officially supported in all three. In fact, what we're seeing is a lot of customers don't put everything in one platform, and it's great because they have different things in different platforms, and they have a little bit of resiliency that way, but then they have to manage it, which is actually another reason why they typically want some sort of platform that allows them to manage all three in one versus using different products from each. All right. As far as the sales development roles, someone said that they see sales development roles specifically on the SentinelOne career page. That sales development role is the entry level to a sales position in cybersecurity versus an SE position in cybersecurity. So that's more in the sales role versus the sales engineering role. But yes, they're the ones that work together for the most part. Someone said that they missed the salary compensation. I actually didn't put that up. That is based on research I did from Glassdoor, Everstage, and CyberSN. I didn't put it on the board. The numbers that I mentioned were specific to cybersecurity. If you're looking for an SE position in a company that is not cybersecurity and is not handling cybersecurity, that does go down. And part of that is supply and demand. There is not as many people who are knowledgeable about cybersecurity. So that tends to be higher than if you were going in and talking about software in like the learning management space or something that's non-cyber. That being said, that's also another way to get into it is if you don't have cyber experience and you want to get into an SE role, you can also get into it in non-cyber but technical company and then make the move as you shore up your cyber experience. Yes, it is possible to transition from an SDR to an SE role. You just keep up your technical acumen, keep up, attend as many free trainings as you can, go in and do some of those free classes. Like I said, Google's great about having those. Amazon has some. There's a lot of free classes out there. I actually know folks that have transitioned from an SDR to an SE role. It's typically easier to do it within the company you're in, because if you're taking those, they're more likely to take a chance on you than someone who's never worked with you and sees only that as your background. Now, that being said, if you have enough classes, and you will have a technical interview. If you're going for an SE role, there will be a technical interview, and they're going to see if you have the technical acumen. So just make sure that if you're going in there, explain, hey, my love is SE. I did an SE training program, but they moved me into an SDR role, and I really want to get back into SE, and just go in and explain that as well. Someone asked the interview structure for SEs. Technical is definitely there. You'll typically have to do a technical interview with another SE. You typically have to do a panel where you present. Depending on the size of the company, one of my jobs that I applied for and wound up getting, I had to present a technical topic to the CEO of the company. He was really focused on hiring good SEs that could present. And he pushed back and made sure that you were okay with someone disagreeing with you and you were able to politely handle all objections. So all companies are going to be different, but it can be very different. The interview process is going to be different, but I would expect those two things. I would expect you're always going to have a tech interview. You're always going to have a panel interview or some sort of presentation to do, especially if you've never been an SE before. As far as tailoring your SE resume, focus on the things that you have done that involve the skills I talked about: technical, relationship building, training, attending events. Use those keywords: trained, implemented. Use those keywords that have to do with implementing a product for a proof of concept, training your customers. Even if they're your internal customers, if you're currently internal and you want to be able to go out and train people, and you train your internal folks, put that in there. Trained internal team on how to utilize Proofpoint for email phishing attacks. That's a great way to do it. That shows that you have a skill of an SE, even though you don't have the title. So different way of doing that. I see someone said they started their career technical, then moved into governance, and that they should think about SE work. I would say SMB, or there is a lot of software out there that actually focuses on governance. If you could get an SE role in a company that sells governance products, you could actually go right into enterprise because you have the governance expertise. And that would be something I would consider, because that's when I said, always look at what you currently do and how you can use that to move into one of those roles. So if you're currently doing governance, there are so many products out there that do risk governance products. Do that, and then you can easily go right into enterprise and not have to start at SMB. If you want to do SMB and you want to be inside, then that would be a great one, but I don't think you would need to. If you want to go straight enterprise, I would look at those governance products, the products that you probably utilize, the products that you're familiar with, and start with those companies. So, and yes, I won't mention the company that you're interning for, but they're a partner of ours, great company, and good luck with your college career. And definitely, if you have any questions, any college students out there, connect with me on LinkedIn. I always love mentoring. I love helping out with college students and really, joining forces and building out the next set of great SE. So
Martha, thank you. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two if they were typing a question, if they want to get it in, since we have a little bit of time. But I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to explain this role. It was awesome hearing just how the different ways to get in and, different compensation packages, as well as, the skill sets to be really working towards. So appreciate you taking your time out of your day to share and educate all of us on that. And I didn't see any more questions coming in, so I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
thank you, everyone.